Welcome back to a brand new episode of Demand Gen Chat. I'm your host, Tara Robertson, and I have a great guest for you today, our friend Colin. Colin White is the Director of Demand Generation at Clearbit. Colin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Tara.
Thanks so much for joining. We were just catching up because we actually recorded this a few months ago, had some audio issues happening in the background, so we're catching up all over again, which is always a great excuse to do so.
Absolutely, yeah.
So how long have you been at Clearbit now?
I think it's been 2.5 years at least. I roll up on my third year in March.
Oh, wow. Coming up on that. That's a big anniversary. That's exciting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it's a long time in SaaS marketing, especially. Usually 10 years are pretty short. Yeah.
Definitely true, especially in marketing. I'd love to hear, obviously, I'm sure your role has evolved since you've been there, but what are the main KPIs that you're responsible for right now and that your team is working on?
Yeah. Yes, the role has changed a lot. I joined as an IC and now run the demand gen team here. And it's funny, the metrics, they've changed slightly over the years. Generally, they're the same. We report on, SAOs, sales accepted opportunities, and the pipeline generated out of those. The way those have been defined over the past couple of years are a little bit different, but it's essentially been the same since I started. And then the other sort of leading indicator is the number of, quality leads or ICP leads we have from, accounts that we score well.
Yeah, and we'll get into lead scoring in a little bit, so I'll save my questions around that. But I'm curious, we're obviously heading into Q4 in a little bit here. So how do you as a team decide these are the key metrics or these are the KPIs that we really want to focus on? Or is it always those sales accepted ops and qualified ops?
Usually always the same. And so we share that metric with our sales org on the SDR and BDR side too. So we're sort of both goaled towards creating pipeline and opportunities for the account exec team on the new business side. So those are changing, but the things that make up that number do change, based on what we're investing in, whether that's a specific type of content or education, or if it's, a new investment in, in-person events or something like that. The makeup of the goal changes as we go on. And then, if we're rolling out a brand new program, we'll make a judgment call on how much makeup of that number it'll take. But, sometimes that's just a gut feel guess on the marketing side. And there's sort of this, I don't know what to call it, science and not science between, how we're thinking about our goals and how the revenue operations and finance team is thinking about our goals, right? They're very, very specific and like the makeup of the goal. And we're sort of a little bit, we still forecast, we do all those things, but we're a little bit more feely in terms of how, as marketers, we are a little bit more on the gut feeling side sometimes with where we'll make up the goal. But when we look at like the success of marketing overall, it still ends up being that overall, pipeline or SAO number driven from marketing. But sort of the makeup of how we get there, yes, RevOps sets that at the outset, but it doesn't matter if we, have 10% more over here versus 10% less over there. As long as we hit that overall goal, everyone is very happy, right?
Yeah, I think a lot of marketers talk about that as kind of the making bets part of marketing, where if we listen to everything the RevOps folks had to say, maybe we'd hit our targets, but we wouldn't take those big swings. So we kind of have to think outside the box sometimes.
Yeah, and it can be hard taking the big swings too, especially when you're under pressure to produce, right? And we're forecasting out of what's worked in the past, and then telling our RevOps team and our finance team, like, look, we think we'll produce this when we invest this amount of money here. But again, like you said, that's only going to get you almost a linear and not even linear because, return usually diminishes as you go in a specific program or a specific way of, marketing. So you have to try and take those big bets, but it can be hard. And honestly,
Mhm.
again, being here for a couple years, especially through the pandemic and COVID, and now we're sort of in a market downturn, it can be even harder to decide to take those swings. And we've gone through periods where we didn't, right?
Hmm.
And you can tell growth stagnates when that
The
happens.
numbers show it,
Essentially,
right?
yeah, or more budget goes less far,
Mm.
because returns do diminish, especially in digital advertising. So that's the thing. And we're actually, it's funny because our Q4 starts at the beginning of November. So we're now going through this process of like, okay, what are the big bets, right? What are we actually going to try and push that's new and, innovative for our team, versus what is that, stable sort of stepped approach. So we're trying to figure out both right now.
Hmm. And is there anything that you've seen at Clearbit or maybe something you do yourself that helps the team kind of, I guess it's feel safe to bring those big bet type of ideas? Because I've definitely been on marketing teams where it felt very much like we were told that we wanted big, crazy ideas, but then those ideas would get shot down once you're actually in that meeting, right? So, how do you create that kind of safe environment for the team?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And to be honest, I think we've missed a little bit of it the past little while. Where again, like, you know, market downturn, COVID, all that stuff makes you feel like you
Mhm.
have this financial obligation to like be very sturdy and structured with everything. And so it can be really hard. I think the ideation and sort of innovation culture on a marketing team is really important. We do go through a process which I think helps in a lot of ways, called ICE scoring, uh, especially around planning time. So concept being, you throw like any idea at the wall. Not any idea, like, it should be formed and have have
Something
have some
appropriate.
opinion and maybe some data backed insight. And even if it doesn't have data backed insight, like, a really good feeling. And then as a team, we take all of those ideas and we score it on impact, confidence, and ease. And with those three sort of metrics on a slider, we can look at what the overall score output is and get a sense of, okay, where should we invest? And sometimes it comes out that, a really high score will have huge impact, but it would be really hard. And that score comes out on top still because the impact could be so high. And if we're all voting as a team, like, it ends up sort of being a democracy, right? Because you're voting as a team. And
Mhm.
if the score comes out on top, that means the entire team believes in it, right? And if
So
the
you're all
entire team
voting on
believes in
that
it,
score?
exactly. So
Right.
so we'll take all of the ideas, put them in a spreadsheet row by row, and then each individual on the team will go and vote on impact, confidence, and ease. And then we'll basically average those numbers, those scores, and get the output from sort of the democratized voting system. Um, and I think the other big thing with it is, if the entire team believes in something, which really you can get out of this, um, everyone's sort of involved and passionate about making it work too. So it's not just like, hey, I'm your boss. I told you to do the thing.
Here's the list of
I
things we're doing.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
here's the list of things. I came up with them all.
Mhm.
It's a voting system, so everyone's involved in planning as well. Yeah,
I like that. Yeah, we're starting to do that with our mostly just on the CRO side to prioritize experiments
exactly.
because
Yeah,
I find it's one of the easiest ways that people have so many ideas without realizing like maybe we shouldn't test every single thing because the impact is not
yeah,
always going to be there.
yeah. Yeah, so it is really hard sometimes to score things that are so new or so different, on the team, or things that are sort of very abstract. You're talking about how CRO,
Mhm.
conversion rate, anything is a little bit easier because there are a ton of ideas. And then you sort of whittle them down based on what you believe the impact is going to be. But with something like an event or a trade show, it's sort of this big, hairy, confusing item. And it's also hard for the entire team to like grok the information about the event and understand why we would want to make the investment and then make those calls. And so sometimes it's funny, as the team has grown on the marketing side, I'll say this, we used to ICE score amongst the entire team. Now it might just be subsets of team members who have sort of
Mhm.
like the same general theme of responsibility. So it might not be the entire team, like we might not have field marketing weigh in on conversion rate optimization, but we'll have our web developer and our performance marketer and our marketing operations, person go and measure or input on CRO, right? And so it's
Mhm.
sort of become subgroupings as we've grown.
Yeah, I think that's a natural way to do it. I mean, the last thing you want is the whole marketing team having to score, like, which
Yeah.
trade show should we go to next year
And,
if it's,
it
like,
ends up
the
being a
web
lot,
person.
a lot of ideas.
Mhm.
Overall, it's not just like the 30 that we had, and 30 is still a lot. But I remember like in 2020 or something, we had something like 30 that we were scoring, and reading and
Wow.
understanding like all of the concepts. So it was a lot. But it does work. I think it works really well for smaller teams.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. And how do I know you guys talk a lot in just, like, your content in general about things like your TAM and just figuring out how big your market is,
Hmm.
establishing your ICPs. How do those fit into your ICE framework, if at all? Or is that more of the person running that program has to consider these things?
Um, yeah, I think it's more foundational than anything. So, when we're thinking about any new concept or idea or thing to prioritize, we're always thinking about it in the sense of like, how does this work within our ideal customer profile? Or,
Mhm.
what is the purpose? Will this engage more of our market, or will this, educate folks who already know about Clearbit, who are in our ICP? It's just a frame of reference instead of something you're sort of thinking about with ideating, right?
Mhm.
So like an example might be on going that like trade show or event route, we might ask like, hey, we're looking for like these 5 criteria points because they, define our ICP. Can you tell me what percentage of the normal attendees or registrants might be in that grouping? Right. And then we can
Mhm.
start to understand like, okay, well, how many people will we actually interact with who fit our ICP versus not? Right. It's a different frame of reference around essentially targeting. When it comes to something like CRO, a little bit less, unless you're talking about sort of the personalization end, where you might want to personalize for subsets of your ICP so that you increase conversion rates for them. But again, it
Mhm.
gives you a frame of reference to really think about what you're doing, right? It's not increased conversion rate for everybody. It's increased conversion rate for the people you care about, right? And
Mhm.
that can be drastically different because, we get a lot of web traffic, but a lot of it is not people we actually want to sell to, or even who could buy our product and implement it well and get value. Um, so we're sort of always framing what we're doing based on that versus,
Mm.
yeah, like individually per project, thinking about it.
Yeah, and when you think about that, I don't even know what to call it. I don't wanna say unqualified traffic because that sounds bad, but
Bad, I
that
know.
that group of traffic that everybody gets, that's people, say, job hunting, it's students poking around your site, it's people that are maybe at a two-person startup who just aren't ready for your tool.
Hmm.
How do you think about kind of excluding those people from your experiments when you're doing something like Zero? Do you guys have a process for that?
Um, yes and no. For some things, yes, but a lot of a lot of what we actually end up looking at is, did it did whatever we just did convert to a qualified lead, right? So when we're looking,
Right.
like, we don't ever really talk about our all lead number or form fill number or anything like that. We're only talking about qualified. So folks that we consider, would be able to buy our product essentially. They fit our ICP. Um,
Mhm.
so when we're talking about like experiment lift or anything like that, we're talking about lift on ICP number, not lift on lead number. And it's only
Mm.
one step further in the qualification process, but it's a valuable step because, like essentially I think it's right now around 50 50 to 60% of our overall leads are actually qualified, right? So
Mhm.
you're kind of missing out on those 40%, essentially.
Yeah. But if
Yeah,
you made a call on a test based on those 40%, you might be very
exactly.
happy
Yeah.
in a couple
Yeah,
months.
exactly. So
Yeah.
it can give you false positives when you
Mhm.
shouldn't have them. So yeah.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I feel like a lot of people I talk to are in that boat where they want to do more CRO, they want to test things, but they're just kind of just starting to do things like traffic exclusions and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And we are lucky, like our product allows for a lot of that. We have
Mhm.
IP lookup as a product, Clearbit Reveal. And so we can sort of exclude folks that we can identify that don't fit our ICP in the test, or we
Mhm.
can sort of just remove those out of any conversions that we actually do track on the website. Right.
Mhm. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I know we were talking a little bit about kind of just Q4 planning in general, but I'm curious now that you're leading a team, how do you help, or maybe it's top down, but I don't think it is. But how do you help the individuals on your team kind of set goals and OKRs, targets, whatever you want to call them, that actually like they can impact on the individual level?
I mean, it is a little bit tops down. Like I think it sort of, I mean, it has to be when we
Partly,
talk about
yeah,
like our SAO or pipeline goal. That is coming from
for sure.
finance with a little bit of song and dance from us saying like, well, we forecast that we can hit 80% of what you told us that you need, and
Mhm.
like, is there any flexibility there? Like, it's the song and dance of forecasting and goal setting from their side. So firstly, I try to make sure that every person has a goal that can roll into like pipeline. That's very important. So
Mhm.
either like a person is owning like a program, like a whole program where they would have a pipeline number. So, we expect X from Y. Or in the case of something like CRO or marketing operations, they have projects or metrics that roll up into those numbers. And maybe talking about like marketing ops is an interesting one to pick on because it can be
Mhm.
hard to put sort of a number against their role. But as an example, right now, Merce on our team is working on updating our scoring models and both simplifying and making them easy to understand, but then also focusing on making sure that we're getting the most out of how we score, right? So when he looks at his objectives and KRs, he's saying like, this project that I'm working on, which is a big hefty thing, scoring, how can I impact pipeline out of scoring, right? And he's now taken the approach of, we're going to make sure we have our core model, and then the ones that are sort of taking the fringe folks and making sure that we're at least thinking about the fringe people that might not be perfectly in our ICP, but have elements of that, and getting those into the system so that we can actually engage with them and talk with them correctly. And overall, that's going to increase the amount of qualified leads that the SDRs and BDRs talk to, and overall increase pipeline, right? And so
Mhm.
he ends up having a metric that is tied directly to it. Um, Although some of the KRs are still going to be like backlog project completion rate or whatever,
Yeah, you just have to work through some stuff in ops. It's just kind of
Yeah,
part.
exactly. But if you have at least one KR that rolls into sort of that key metric for the entire team, I think that's sort of one important factor across everybody.
Mhm. Yeah, you're right that that's a tough role where I feel like it ends up being a to-do list a lot of the time when you
Yeah,
see their
and it's
KRs, it's like, oh, not the
yeah,
most
it's how
exciting
to
work.
how to make it not a to-do list is very difficult. But
Mhm.
I think it's the sort of the big swing projects that make it not. So it is something big and hairy to focus on that
Yeah.
does have impact overall, and you can see it very easily versus like, I did 10 backlog projects that increased productivity on the marketing team by 5%. And, that's not as easy to understand.
Mhm. Yeah, that totally makes sense to make them, especially it's one of those roles I know you mentioned turnover earlier just really quickly, but it's a crucial role on the team that you don't want them going anywhere. So to
No.
give them really important projects that everybody can get excited about is even more important for
Yeah.
ops.
The institutional knowledge that a marketing ops person holds is um, immense. And I know that I was marketing ops prior to doing demand gen.
Yeah.
And I know when I spent 2 weeks just trying to write documents whenever I left a company because all of the processes were in my head, which is, bad documentation on my end, but also that's just
But
what
it happens
happens
when it's one person. Yeah.
when it's one person and you're at a startup and you're trying to do all the things. And yeah, so it is very hard. So make your marketing ops folks happy, everybody. That's
Yeah.
maybe the
We
lesson
actually
out of
just
this.
hired we just hired our first marketing ops, which is a little bit crazy. But I'm
Uh,
realizing how much is in my head too. You just don't take
oh,
it for granted, the things you just kind of
totally.
do, right?
Totally. Yeah. We held off on marketing ops too for quite a long time. Merce, who's on the team now, he started just back in March.
Hmm.
Um, and, it went 2 years of my life here without
Yeah.
marketing ops, and even longer before that. And we were quite a large team before we had the function. But um, yeah, it's a tough one for sure.
And how did you manage things like lead scoring without marketing ops? Because that's one
Uh,
area that we've just kind of very simplified and not worried about up until now because, again, small team
yeah,
priorities.
I we were in a special position. We had 3 people, and we still have a bunch of people on the team who are ex marketing operations, have gone on to
Mm.
do other work. So while we didn't have an official person, we sort of all band-aided the entire system together as like a second
Mm.
job, and we had you know 3 people do separate pieces of the function. Honestly, that was like maybe a mistake. One, because it took us a long time to actually do the work, right? Because we weren't
Mm.
involved in it all the time. And then two, because it was 3 people, like things weren't perfectly aligned across all the systems, and
Mhm.
it did become a pain. But yeah, so we were in a very lucky position. And then secondly, I'll call out, we use a company called Mad Kudu, which does machine learning based scoring models. And so they have, a great support team, CS team, and consulting team that we use
Mm.
a lot. So yeah, that helped out from our end, so that we didn't have to manually create the rule set and sort of constantly be tweaking. And honestly, like I don't really believe in creating a manual lead scoring system. I think human bias has too much impact in how you set stuff up. So
Mhm.
you using machines to do it is probably the best way. And actually, it's funny I say that because now we have a mix of both. The model that Merce worked on this past quarter was half human, half machine based. So like we set some
Mhm.
rules, especially for new segments that we're going after that we haven't historically, either done well in or even engaged with. And then also the model picks up sort of the rest that we miss as
Mm.
a manually made scoring model.
I'm curious how that'll perform for you because I feel like that context that a human provides is obviously super important, but I also see your point on like the biases could be
Yeah. So,
there.
and it's to be clear too, like we only score out of that system on the like company or contact quality. We don't
Mm.
score based on the engagement they've had with us. And so we use people to do that part. Like, when should I engage this person? It's the person's choice, essentially, which works and also has challenges. It's a lot of education for the team. Um, but the scoring model is really just looking at, like, is this company a good fit, or how good of a fit is this company based on historics? How good of
Mhm.
a contact
Right.
is this based on historics? And then gives us sort of like a prioritization model from the quality perspective, but not from the activity or engagement perspective, like a normal MQL might.
Gotcha. Yeah, I feel like that's where the biases can really come in is when
Yeah,
I'm running programs that I'm also setting
yeah,
engagement
yeah,
scoring. You can be
yeah.
it's a
This
little bit
event, this event was
tricky.
really important. Like, it
Yeah,
was
or this
really,
one
really
page of the
important, and
website is just
yeah,
killing
yeah.
me. Yeah.
I worked a really hard time on this landing page. It is worth it, guaranteed. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
plus 10 points for this page. Exactly.
Yeah.
So there is something to be said about having, like, if you are rolling out an engagement scoring model, having someone like marketing ops who, again, humans are biased, but they're not as biased as like the person running the programs that you're. driving people
Yeah.
to. So
Yeah. And that's the other, like, if your ops team or person, individual, is the person owning it and they don't own the programs, I
yeah.
mean, they're in it to make the best version of the model or the best version of
Hmm.
the system, and to produce the most pipeline out of what they have, the most productivity out of what they have. So yeah, if you're just like a demand gen marketer taking your score up and passing it to sales, being like, look at all my great leads, like maybe not the best.
Yeah, that's the problem at startups. I feel like you end up doing both roles a lot of the time. And then that's why a lot of us have said, like, well, lead scoring isn't working for me because
Yeah.
that's like my exact experience in past roles.
Yeah. It's funny, like the MQL is dead sort of talk track.
Hmm.
I don't think the MQL is dead necessarily. You're going to call it something else. It's just that we've used MQL poorly as marketers for a long time because we've created these manually biased scoring models that say this is an MQL, when maybe
Hmm.
it actually isn't, right?
Right. And then when you're the sales rep that has to call that person, they don't agree
Exactly.
that they're an MQL. So they're like, why are you calling?
Exactly. Good.
So just switching gears a little bit, I'd love to chat about, obviously, you have a lot of experience on the paid social side, just paid ads in general.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of us have been talking about just budgets being tighter right now. Hopefully it's a short-term thing, but no one really knows. Is there anything you're seeing that's maybe promising in all of this? I feel like there's a lot of bad news going around right now, so I'm trying to find trying to find the
Promising
silver line.
notes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah. Um, Honestly, for us at least, the Clearbit
Mhm,
side, things haven't changed that drastically. For us, I think, you know, the summer was a little bit tough. Overall, I think sort of everybody felt that in some way, shape, or form. Um, but partially because we measure our marketing team up against, pipeline generation overall versus individual campaign performance, um,
mhm,
that ends up helping a lot. So we're not actually looking at like, you know, the success of one Google ad campaign. We're looking at the success of the marketing budget up against the overall marketing generated pipeline, even from
mhm.
organic and direct and all of the, non-attributable. Um, so that ends up helping us a lot when we look at performance. So nothing really to call out, unfortunately, on my side. I'd say it's almost normal for us,
That's a
which
good
is
thing. I
weird.
mean, I feel like the
Yeah, I mean, it's a
headlines are
good
so
thing.
panicky, so
It's a
that's
good thing.
yeah.
I will say that, conversion rates have dropped. It is definitely harder to connect with folks, like book meetings from any
Mhm,
source, not just, ones that are a little bit more peripheral and not a hand raise. Even hand raises we found, like demo requests have been harder to connect with.
hmm,
And it just feels like people are sort of tire kicking a little bit, when they're browsing software now, or it takes a lot more for someone to actually engage because they know it's going to go to their CFO, right? It's not just going to
mhm,
their boss or their manager. It's going all the way up the chain. Even myself, I felt that, some of our processes have changed, and now there's a few more layers of approval, and I'm more wary on, well, what do I request, or even how do I
mm,
position this request? Like I need to make sure that everything is dialed in a little bit more, even if we're reporting at the overall number. Like finance is just a little bit more tough today,
mhm.
which, isn't a bad thing overall. It's just makes a little bit more work for me than, a year ago. But
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, that's not all bad. I think
no,
I think being careful with the tools we buy can help in the long run, obviously, because you don't end up with like a very bloated.
we've spent a long time paring down our tools over the
Mm,
past year. Like we were bloated a year and a half ago, and
mhm.
we've like, yeah, we still buy sometimes duplicates, and we don't even know it. And finance is
And is that
sending me.
across different teams that you're buying the duplicates or
No,
in
it's
marketing?
across just marketing,
Yeah.
still, but it's because, Clearbit's been around for quite a long time. We've had team transitions, new people
Right.
coming in, people leaving. You never know, right? So that's sort of been a process for us. Speaking of marketing ops too, it's been something that they've been trying to do. It's like, do we need SEM Rush and Ahrefs, or can we just use one?
Mm.
One,
Yeah, but it's like
So
this one person on the team preferred this tool, but they're not here anymore.
exactly. Or like you
right.
got one extra metric out of the other tool, so you bought it anyway, and you don't even use it anymore. But that was the original reason, and sort of everyone's afraid to turn it off because they don't know what it works on. Yeah, sorry, my hand gestures of sorry for everyone listening to just the audio, but I'm worried.
That's
hand
the
gestures
afraid
right
face.
there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm curious because you mentioned events a little bit earlier too, but how is event follow-up going for you guys? Did you attend any of the big ones last month or in September, I should say?
Yeah, it's funny. We did. We actually sponsored a bunch of stuff with y'all at Chili Piper. And so far so good. It's funny. It was our first time being out in person. I think even since I joined, and I joined a week before COVID essentially hit the States. Like borders locked down on day 7 for me or something. So that it's been funny going there. Overall, so far so good. For us, I think it's more about brand recognition now than driving direct meetings out of a lot of these things, especially when you consider it's like something like an after hours party or something like that. It's not necessarily about booking meetings. One interesting insight that I had is that like we ended up having a lot of people just yell across the conference room floor. I'm putting that in quotes because a lot of these were outside, just noticing our logo. And it's not something you feel online. You don't feel like, the person coming up and being like, oh my God, I'm a customer, or I'm a user, or I love your product. I've used you at 3 of my last jobs and I buy you. You're the first tool that I buy when I join. You don't feel that online. It's very hard. Even through like listening to gong calls, everyone's in their little like Zoom box. And no one's excited about anything. So that's one tidbit that across our whole team felt very, very good, right? Because you feel it a little bit more than on Zoom.
Yeah, I believe that. I couldn't make it out to any events this year, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But we actually had a lot of great video content come out of it, which was a lot of it was honestly just organic, which I don't know if it comes out across that way, but a lot of it was what you're saying. A customer would walk by or someone who likes us would walk by and we'd be like, can you repeat that on camera?
Yeah.
Can you say that again? And
exactly.
I think because people are just anxious to be out of the house and happy to be with people were so willing to be on camera and to do that stuff. It surprised me, honestly. I don't know that I would have been as eager to do that if I was just walking by a booth. But
just even to come over and chat, everyone like seemed very happy. Yeah, I did one of our booths in San Francisco, and like being the demand gen team, and then obviously selling to a lot of demand gen folks at Clearbit, having customers come up and we just talk shop. Everyone was very into just coming over and talking instead of, the normal like sales pitch at a booth or something. But yeah, it was a lot of fun from my end, just hearing from folks out in the wild who are excited about the company I work at. Yeah, it's a good feeling.
Yeah, that's nice to come home with those feelings. Must feel really good.
Yeah, exactly. It definitely re-ups the energy, I would say. Yeah.
Cool. And have you had any challenges kind of, I don't want to say justifying, but kind of proving out the ROI of these events, knowing that again, to your point, a lot of them, you're not going to come home with hundreds of meetings booked, but they cost as much as booking 100 meetings online maybe. So how do you kind of reconcile that when it comes to planning and finances?
Well, we'll see, because we just did our first bunch of them in September.
Yeah, it's early now.
So we're still waiting a hot minute to do the official reporting on them. But the initial parts of some of this were really that like the talk track and honestly the experience was that we got to talk to people who probably would never fill out a form and raise their hand. Like either at big companies or at current customers where they have 5 different product lines and they've seen our name in their master data system, big warehouse thing, but they've just never been able to ask or figure out like how the product is used. And so
Mm.
it was a much less, it was a much more frictionless way for them to come and engage in a conversation around like, what is Clearbit, at sort of these really important logos for us, really important companies. And we just know that they'd probably never fill out a form. Right. And we also know that because we just don't get demo requests from the company at all. Right.
Yeah,
So
there's some big ones
just,
that you're just never going to see them until
yeah, exactly. Like just being able to talk to someone at the organization is a big deal for some of our sales team.
Mhm.
And then the other thing that we've done is, really just engage the sales team afterwards and sort of bring their stories forward in terms
Mm.
of, maybe this isn't direct ROI, but hey, I talked to 3 prospects who are in open conversations, and I was able to move 2 deals forward. And that's never going to show up, or it'll barely show up in an influence report or something like that. But every deal matters, and it's really important. And it
Mhm.
could be the key thing that pushed it over the line. And so hearing the stories from the sales folks that were at these events are some of the more important things too that we're trying to promote, while we sort of wait on that influence number or
Mhm.
the other metrics that we're looking at for these events. But those are some of the ways that we're thinking about it, at least on our side, especially when it comes to like off trade show floor type stuff,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah, no, I think that's great feedback, especially if you can get the sales team to sing the praises of an event. Because marketing can say all day, like, oh, we talked
Hmm.
to all these great companies, but for a sales rep to do that goes even further. So that's a great way to look at it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Cool. Great. Well, I'm just going to move on to our quick fire round. So just a couple more
Sure.
questions for you, Colin. I know we're running short on time.
Yeah.
So first, is there another marketer you follow that our listeners should go check out and give them a follow?
I'll call it Nick Bennett at Alice, because we've been doing these events. He is definitely an awesome event marketer, and doing even more
Mhm.
now. So definitely have been following along with him, and chatted with him a couple times about it while we move into doing these. Yeah.
Great. And is there an under the radar channel or could be a tactic that your team is either loving right now or just kind of starting to play around with?
Ooh, yeah. When we originally did this, because we're re-recording, I think I said
Yeah,
webinars.
you can have two.
I think I said webinars,
Mhm.
virtual events, if you will. Um, I still think that they can work, though the summer had a lull and we're just starting to kick
Mhm.
back up. But we were driving a lot of pipeline, honestly, out of live webinars, not even on demand or anything like that. So I'm still going to use that as my answer. I think webinars are not dead, and they are definitely alive and producing.
Great. And lastly, where can we go to follow you? What channels are you most active on?
I am not an active social media anything, but if you do want to follow me, LinkedIn is the best. Just search Colin White Clearbit and you'll find me. It's probably the best way to do it, and I'm sure the link will be in the description of the podcast. So
Yes.
yeah,
Yeah, it'll be in there. Don't worry. And
perfect.
we'll link for Nick's too, just in case people aren't following him, but I'm sure most people are
Yes,
who are listening to
yes,
this. He's
absolutely.
everywhere right now.
Yeah, he is.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks so much for joining me, Colin.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Tara. It was great to chat.
And thanks everybody for listening. We'll be back in 2 weeks with a brand new episode.